Did you ever wonder what eastern Montana is like? In this video, we'll give you a quick tour of the east side of the state. So back in October, I had to drive through eastern Montana and I thought I would do a little video on it. This video will go from east to west, so I was on Interstate 94 and then you cut up towards Highway 2 and you take these very rural roads, and the first little town that you get to when you're going that direction is Circle. And Circle, Montana is like many of the towns along this route that we're going to be taking. It's totally based on agriculture. There's ranches that surround the town. The little town itself, you can see the tractor implement dealerships, and everything's based on the agricultural industry that's prominent in this area. And these little towns kind of remind me of towns in the Midwest. They're just totally based on ag. Once you head out of Circle, you'll get into one of the Indian reservations. Montana has 7 of them. Here's a map of the reservations in Montana. But you get up into the Fort Peck reservation, and the town of Wolf Point is the headquarters of that particular reservation. And Wolf Point has a population of 2,700 people, and you have some of the fast food restaurants and bigger stores here. It's one of the bigger towns in northern Montana. But there, as far as big cities go, Wolf Point isn't huge. As I was heading to the west, I spent the night in I spent the night in Glasgow, so I didn't get any footage of that. But the next day, continued heading west on Highway 2, and the next little town that you get to is Malta. And Malta has a population of almost 2,000 people. And again, all these towns on the northeastern part of Montana are all based on agriculture, pretty wide open land. They all have grain elevators there. The Highway 2 is known as the High Line, and it goes all the way across from the border of Idaho to the border of North Dakota, and I believe it's over 600 miles if you take it the entire length of the state. And as you drive across this highway, you just come through all these little towns. Harlem, not to be confused with the one in New York that only has a population of 861 people. And these are all based on the ranches and agriculture in the area. One of the other things you'll notice as you head along this road is the railroad tracks are usually right along the road, and as you can see, all these grain elevators are situated right along the railroad. And the railroad is huge for this part of the state. They transport all of the grain and everything that's grown out here. Agriculture is Montana's biggest industry, and tons and tons of wheat are grown in Montana and a lot of barley. But ag is huge out here, and the railroad is a big part of what makes it all work. There's a big train station in Havre. The Amtrak actually runs across the northern part of Montana and ends up in Minneapolis and Chicago if you go that direction, or Seattle the other way. But Havre's one of the main train stations here. Havre's also one of the biggest cities along this route. As you can see, almost 10,000 people here. And Havre's also home to Montana State Northern College. And you can find most of the big box stores and any fast food restaurants you want here in Havre. But one of the coolest things about Havre is back in 1904, most of the city burnt down in a huge fire. And so the business owners, while they were waiting for the city to be rebuilt, they moved underground. There was already a set of tunnels under there. And so you can tour, actually, it still exists, all these old stores and old bars and different places that are underneath what you see here in Havre. And it's kind of one of the neat things in Montana history that you can find here in Havre. And as you drive through town, you obviously would never know that exists, but if you ever make it to Havre, that's something you should probably check out, because it's a pretty neat little tour to take and something cool to see. So as you continue west out of Havre, you just keep running into all these little towns. This one, another great name, the Kremlin. And there's just all these little towns that are located along this Highway 2. And it's just wide open country, ranch land. And like I was saying before, Montana's biggest industry is agriculture. And the state has almost 28,000 farms and ranches that are located over 59 million acres of land. And a lot of them are pretty large. The average size ranch in Montana is 2,000 acres, 2,100 acres. And the biggest crops, like I said, are wheat, and beef is the other big thing in Montana. But it's actually, Montana's the national leader in the production of wheat, dry peas, lentils, flax, and it ranks number 2 in the nation for honey production. So here in the northern part of Montana, if you're into agriculture and you're into the wide open spaces, you will definitely get that flavor up here. Every town has its grain elevators right along the railroad tracks, like we said earlier, and they all service the ag industry up here. If you're looking to move to Montana and looking for lower prices for real estate, these are the types of towns that obviously you can find a house for much cheaper than you're going to find in the mountains or near Glacier Park or down in Bozeman or any of the places we've talked about in our other videos. There's just obviously not a lot going on in these particular towns, not a lot of industry that isn't about the ag or the services. Shelby is a bigger town, and it's it's located on Interstate 15, which heads up into Canada into a huge border crossing. They get a lot of semi traffic on Interstate 15 that's coming out of Canada. This is one of the main arteries for shipments coming out of Canada, and it goes right through Shelby. And so Shelby has turned out to be one of the bigger towns on the High Line. So the interstate runs south, and it goes through Great Falls, Helena, Butte, Dillon, and then heads down through Idaho, Utah, and ends up in Southern California all the way to the Mexican border. So it's a pretty major artery for shipments throughout the western part of the U.S. One of the things we definitely need to talk about is the weather up here on the High Line. I pulled this chart. It's actually Shelby, but all of these towns along the High Line, the charts are basically identical. What you need to know is the winters can be pretty brutal. There can be some bad blizzards up here. As you can see, the average low temperature in January is 8, which means there's a lot of days lower than that, and there's, days above it, but 8 is not a real warm temperature. So part of the reason it gets so cold in the winter is the wind chills. There's a lot of wind that comes off of that front range of the Rockies, and it gets bitter cold. There are times where you'll get wind chills that are 10, 20, 30 below zero, and sometimes even colder. So if you're looking for palm trees and golf courses in the winter, the High Line is not your place. So once you get through the last little town we went through of Cutbank, you can start to see the mountains out in the distance to the west, and this is always my favorite part of the trip as I'm heading west, is seeing the front range of the Rockies. They're awesome. You can see them for quite a ways, and they just keep getting bigger and bigger, and it's just such a wall after being on the prairie for so long and driving so many miles of wide open prairie land. It's kind of amazing to see these mountains. They just kind of pop up out of nowhere, and it's quite a sight. And it always kind of makes me think of the settlers that were moving west and what they must have thought when they hit this part of the country, because that had to be quite the thing to see for them. And the last town we're going to go through before we end this video is Browning, and this is back on the reservation. This is actually the Blackfeet reservation here, and Browning is a pretty good sized town. Browning's also close. The next town over is East Glacier Park. So basically Browning and the reservation runs right along the east side of Glacier National Park. And so a lot of the industry in this town is service industry, restaurants, and there's a new casino on the outside of town here that you'll see here in a minute. But a lot of tourists come this direction if they're coming from the east to access Glacier Park. You can continue north out of Browning and hit the little town of Babb, which is right on the border of the park. And at this point, Highway 2 heads into the mountains over to the Flathead Valley.
Thank you for watching our video. Please call, text, or email for more information. And don't forget to watch our other videos about Montana.